Having finished viewing or listening to every Patrick Troughton story, I am now going to discuss my top 10 favorite of his serials. I found that there was a lot to love when I went through his entire era as the Doctor, and I can't wait to discuss these stories with you today. And before we get started, I do want to say that, this is my personal list. It is not going to align with yours. Your top 10 stories from Troughton's era are probably going to be a little bit different to mine, and that is absolutely fine so long as we are both having fun. And also, there are going to be some mild spoilers in this top 10. If you have not seen his era of the Doctor, then there's going to be bits of information in terms of when companions leave and certain things that happen in stories, but I'm going to try not to give too much away. And with all that said, let's get started with the top 10 Second Doctor stories. I was a little bit surprised when I sat down for this to find that The Evil of the Daleks made this list because it was a story that I enjoyed. I thought there was a lot to like. It was entertaining throughout. I enjoyed Jamie as a companion. I enjoyed the Doctor. We were introduced to Victoria in this one. And yeah, that was just it. On the whole, it was enjoyable. There wasn't all that much in terms of a lasting impression that the story left me with. This is a 7-parter, and it probably doesn't need to be. You probably could have had this one be a little bit tighter, be a little bit shorter, and honestly be more entertaining for it. But it is 7 parts, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I found this to be a good Dalek story, but there were definitely some things that I wasn't entirely sold on, and it's possible because this one is a missing story, it's not getting as much love from me. That does sometimes happen, where just viewing a missing episode, you don't get the full experience because that's the nature of only listening to the audio and seeing the surviving footage. It's possible when this one gets animated, I'll find that I really enjoy it, but for now, it's just a solid, enjoyable, and sadly missing story. The Mind Robber. This is a good, entertaining 5-part story that just moves along at a great pace, is absolutely crazy, and so much fun. I really enjoy just all of the different situations that our characters get thrown into in The Mind Robber. You just have so much going on here. Seeing them in the land of fiction is just a ton of fun as they get introduced to all of these characters and have to deal with them, and it's just a story that you can sit down and have an absolute blast with. And that was the case for me, where I watched it and found that it was so different from not only Patrick Troughton's run as the Doctor so far, but really everything that we've had in Doctor Who up to this point. It feels entirely unique, and most of all, it's just a ton of fun. The Faceless Ones. This one is just a really good story. I thoroughly enjoy it, and I actually enjoy the animation about the same amount as I enjoy just the surviving footage and audio. They're both really good. I think the Doctor and Jamie are solid in this. They work quite well together and on their own. They get into a lot of trouble in the story as people don't really believe them in terms of what is actually happening with Chameleon Tours at this airport, and the villains of the story are really good. I think Captain Blade does an excellent job of having this presence to him and really kind of commanding the screen a little bit when he's on there. It's really good stuff, and I love the resolution of this story too, the way that everything plays out, which I won't tell you about here if you haven't seen it, but I think that it's just handled really well and makes for what is ultimately kind of a different experience with this show. And it's possible the story is maybe a little too long, but that is okay because they had so much interesting stuff to play with and were able to use that throughout the 6 parts of this story. And I suppose Ben and Polly don't have the best exit in this one. It didn't ruin the episode. It was just a shame that these companions don't have a particularly good exit. They just kind of leave. But most everything in this story really works. I mean, it's on the top 10, so it's got to be doing something right, and it really is. This is a good one. The Moonbase. This is one of the earlier Troughton stories and a really good one. I thoroughly enjoyed the Moonbase. I find it to be just a really great Cyberman tale. I love seeing them invade this base on the moon, and the sort of ambiance to this story is absolutely fantastic. The Cybermen work really well. I actually think the animation is pretty good in this one for the 2 parts that it is animated, and this story is just thoroughly entertaining. I think Jamie is good. I think the Doctor is good. It's just doing so much right in terms of a Cyberman story. There's very little that I can fault this one on. This is definitely one of those stories that I do wish got more love than it actually gets because there's a ton in it to enjoy. Cybermen are just such great villains, and they're great in here. This is a 4-parter, it's a really tight story, it's paced really well, and it does an excellent job of portraying them as an actual threat within this one. And sometimes the Cybermen are just kind of there, sometimes they're a real threat, and that was the case for this one, where you really felt their presence and understood how big of a threat they were to not just the Doctor and the main companions, but to everyone here on this moon base. The Enemy of the World. This is just a great story, and Patrick Troughton does a fantastic job of playing two great roles in this one. I think Salamander is just a really, really good villain, and the Doctor is really good in this one. Jamie and Victoria get a decent amount to do, and it's just a really enjoyable spy thriller. It's so different to everything else that you get in season 5 of Doctor Who, and I really enjoy this breakup from these more monster stories where you have this future set, well, now it's in the past, but it was a future set story where they had to deal with this man who was so corrupt and was doing all these horrible things. And I just love this one. I love the style to it. I love what they get up to. I love the more that we learn about Salamander's plan as we go further into this one. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. And this is just a thoroughly entertaining adventure, which I have an absolute blast with. There's really not much I can fault the story with because it does a really good job at introducing new elements and revealing more about Salamander's plan and just how messed up of a person he is. This is really just a great story. The Tomb of the Cybermen. It is no surprise to see it high on this list because it is a great one. I mean, what more could you ask for in terms of a Cyberman story with the second Doctor? This is really good. I think Jamie is great. I think the Doctor is great. I think the Cybermen are such a great presence in this story, and I love the way that we are introduced to them with them exiting the tombs. I mean, how fantastic is that with them all coming out and having the cyber leader to sort of have this central representation of this big threat, because you have all the Cybermen and then you have that cyber leader who is the main person in charge, and that was a great way to have this kind of big threat and also sort of have a central foe. I thought that was handled quite well, and also it's just a lot of fun. I love this as sort of an adventure story where they go to the tombs on, I think it's called Telos, and they find the Cybermen after having to go through all of these puzzles and different things, and it's just so much fun while also just being a great Cybermen serial at the start of this season. The War Games. This is Troughton's final story, and a really good one. I mean, what an epic tale. You have so much going on here with all these different war zones as our Doctor and companions try to find their way through this. I think the Doctor is great. I think Jamie's really good, and so is Zoe, and there's just a lot to like about this one. I think it is an excellent exit for these two companions. It's just great, and as an end to the Doctor and his era of Doctor Who, this one is really good. I mean, there's so much to love, and it's sad to see Patrick Troughton leave the part of the Doctor, and the actual story in this one is really interesting. Yeah, it probably didn't need to be 10 parts long, but they managed to have so much going on in this one, and I mean a lot going on, that it was okay because I was continually interested throughout. Even my least favorite episodes in this one were really engaging, and the ones that are great are just brilliant, and this is a fantastic end to this entire era of the show, and a great send-off for this Doctor. The Web of Fear. This is such a tight, entertaining, claustrophobic, atmospheric story. It does so much right and very little wrong. Every single episode is engaging. This presents the Yeti much better and in a much more villainous way than their previous entry in this season. They work well as a villain because of the way that they're actually used in this setting and just the way that this story is constructed. The Doctor is great, the companions are pretty good, and plus the Brigadier is in this one, and this is just a really enjoyable tale that is so unique. I mean, it really does feel different from everything else on this list because of just the style of it, the atmosphere. Right from the beginning of this one, it feels different to this era of Doctor Who. It feels unique, and it really is. There's really just a lot to enjoy about this story. The Power of the Daleks. This is the first post-regeneration story, and man, it just feels like they got everything right from this first one. I love the way that these companions are introduced to a new Doctor, and I love the way that Patrick Troughton performs this new incarnation of the role. The Daleks are really interesting and a really good villain in this one. It's thoroughly entertaining, and plus, just the Doctor, absolutely fantastic. And there's so little that's wrong with this one. It just does an excellent job at introducing you to a new person playing this role, and he's utterly brilliant. I mean, it is sad that because it is animated, you can't see the physicality in his performance, but regardless, he is really good in the part, and the way that, Ben and Polly aren't sure if it actually is the Doctor added a really interesting element because this was the first time this had ever happened in the show. it just does a brilliant job at being thoroughly entertaining, not just because it is the first of its kind, but also because it's a really good Dalek story. Truly, this is a fantastic post-regeneration story, and also one of Troughton's best. Fury from the Deep. Now, it really could not have been any other story for me because I had an absolutely fantastic time listening to this one. And yeah, so far it's just an audio format, and in a way I'm glad I haven't seen the animation yet because I don't know if I'm going to like it as much, because this one just has such a fantastic atmosphere in audio format and has a brilliant claustrophobic nature to it. The music in this story is absolutely fantastic. It has this sort of heartbeat to it that really adds to this one and really contributes to the claustrophobic nature of everything. And it's crazy that you just have seaweed and foam working so brilliantly as a villain. Like, how does that work? It's just so excellently told as a story, so brilliant, so claustrophobic. Truly, everything is working really well in this one, and it's also a good exit for Victoria as a companion. I mean, this does so much right. It's got a great villain, it's got a fantastic atmosphere, and the Doctor is great, Jamie's really good, and that's really what you need in this one. And it's really impossible for me to compare this to any other Troughton story as something that is similar, because it is utterly unique and feels so different and so fresh, and I just love this one, and I'm super excited to see the animation whenever it comes out, and I do hope that it is as good as the audio format. But just in the surviving audio that we have so far, this is one of the best of classic Doctor Who, and easily Troughton's best story. And that's that. Those are my top 10 second Doctor stories, top 10 Patrick Troughton stories. I really enjoyed this era of Doctor Who, and I had an absolutely great time just finding that there was so much love in it, so many just great stories, with obviously Fury from the Deep being my favorite. And if you'd like, you can leave your top 10 down below of this era, or just a few of your favorites, whatever you feel like doing, or not, that's absolutely fine. I do hope to see you around soon as we kick off reviews for the third Doctor in Season 7, and if not, if you were just joining me for the second Doctor reviews, that is absolutely 100% fine, just as long as you know that I thoroughly appreciate your time with me in these reviews. And if that's going to be all for you, then thank you very much for joining, and for those that are going to continue watching, I will see you around soon. And with all of that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.